One suspect held the victim down, while the other suspect stabbed her 19 times in the arms, legs, and torso. Many of the stab wounds struck major organs, but incredibly and thankfully, the victim survived this brutal assault.
It's unthinkable. He's talking about two 12-year-olds. There's your suspects. They're facing attempted murder charges after stabbing another 12-year-old 19 times. Now, police say this was a plot. It was hatched back in December and finally carried out Friday night. They invite the victim over for a sleepover. They were going to kill her that night, didn't. Instead, it's the next morning. They're playing the innocent game of hide and seek. Then the game ends, as he just described. One's holding the victim down and says, "Go crazy, go ballistic." That's when the stabbing ensues, 19 times. The arms, hands, and torso. The victim fighting for her life. The two girls charged as adults. Now, why? What's the motive here? Police say these two had a twisted affinity for death and horror, obsessed with some mythological demon-like figure named Slender Man. And by killing, they would become his proxies and then run off and live with him in a nearby forest. Got to bring in psychotherapist and author of the book Till Death Do Us Part, Robbie Ludwig, as we look at the creepypasta website where they get some of these ideas. And also with us, criminal defense attorney Janet Johnson. Happy birthday, but a rough story here on your birthday. Robbie, we'll start with you. How do 12-year-olds take? I mean, a lot of 12-year-olds are fascinated with horror movies. How do they take it to this?
Well, clearly, these are kids with a disturbed mind, because you can take a healthy child and they wouldn't have the same reaction to these scary mythological images. When I was reading about the story, one of the girls said that Slender Man is in her dreams, and she had the idea that he knows exactly what she's thinking at all times. And another girl said they really believe that engaging in these acts would help them live with Slender Man in their forest and mansion. So it makes me wonder what their grasp on reality is, if they're confusing reality and fantasy. You'd have to rule out some kind of childhood psychotic disorder. That would need to be looked into. But we're also looking into a conduct disorder. We can't diagnose young kids with sociopathy because their brains are still young and changing. But we need to rule out, clearly there's a characterological issue going on here as well.
And how do you know as a parent if your child's losing it? If this isn't just a fascination for watching a scary movie and it becomes this?
It's a really good question, and that's all about the relationship you have with your child, observing what are they looking at online, having a conversation about what their interests are, encouraging them to talk to you about things that are on their mind, things that are of interest to them. And as a parent, if you have some concern, making an intervention sooner rather than later. You can never make an intervention too soon.
Okay.
If you have questions, if you are concerned, there are professionals out there who can be a separate set of eyes to help you make an assessment.
There you go. And the proprietor of this website I'd mentioned, Creepypasta, I mean, basically their statement is, don't blame us. You know, there are a lot of people watch, but let me read it. It says this: most people don't watch Hannibal and turn into serial killers. That goes on to say, I don't believe that it's the fault of Slender Man or horror writing in general that this happened. I remember reading scary stories and watching slasher movies when I was a child and younger teenager, and while they certainly gave me nightmares, they did not instill in me a desire to murder my friends. So there's that statement there. Let's get to the charges here, Janet. 12-year-olds charged as adults. Is it because of the violent nature of this, or is that just where you start?
No, I think it is because of the violent nature, but when we talk about how their brains aren't fully developed, their personalities aren't developed, and the fact that two girls did it, I mean, it's not just one lone actor. This is peer pressure at work. This is what happens with juveniles, is what one might not do alone, another one could get them to do as a group. And that's where my concern, and I know when you look at this, you think these should be treated by adults. They did an adult thing. It's a horrible thing. But an adult court isn't going to be equipped to deal with the things that we're talking about. And that's one of the concerns. You know, these are still little girls, even though they're doing horrible things. And when they're questioned, they confess, like all other juveniles. When I represent juveniles, they're taught to tell the truth. And even though they do horrible things, they usually confess.
Okay. do you expect it to end up in juvenile court? And the backdrop here is, as I'd mentioned at the outset, this was a plot hatched in December. I mean, December, little 12-year-olds should be thinking about Christmas and gifts, not killing a friend.
And talk about premeditation. I mean, that's the thing. You can't say that they snapped. This is something that's been 6 months, the build-up to this. But usually, in my experience, once it goes to adult court, they don't go back to juvenile. That process is usually reversed. So I would expect they're treated like adults. But hopefully, even in adult court, there's youthful offender, there's programs that they hopefully design for children. And let's face it, these are all children that we're talking about.
I know. Just all 3 12-year-olds, just unthinkable stuff. Janet, thank you, and again, happy birthday.
Thanks.
Robbie, thanks. Great seeing you as always.
Thank you.